Billy as the Herald of Modern Times by Guido Austria, February 1985.
Herald of Modern Times seems a little old-fashioned towards the end of the 20th century and close to the 21st century. But in fact, Billy is the Herald of Modern Times. He himself initially vehemently resisted this designation, which was given to him by the Arahat Athersata level, until Pata explained to him that this designation does indeed apply to him, because a herald is a human being who brings the creational natural laws and recommendations, and thus what was initially called the spiritual teaching, but will later more correctly be called the creation energy teaching, which Billy will only later call the creation energy teaching when the right time comes. The teaching includes and teaches not only high spiritual matters, but also many matters concerning the well-being of the planet Earth and its humanity, as well as peace and its interpretation, as well as the importance of the self-education of Earth humans, their correct behavior, and the personal formation of their personality, which begins at an early age and remains of urgent importance throughout life. It is therefore also the task of the Herald of Modern Times to denounce grievances on earth and among its humanity with harsh and sometimes loud words, which Billy also practices extensively in writing and orally. I have been commissioned by Billy and Semyaze, which I was allowed to learn separately and especially in a few years, because I was appointed by Billy and Semyaze to do so, to put some very important things into words, which will only become apparent in later times, and which should relieve Billy in his ever more rigorous work as the herald of the Nokodimion teaching. For future readers in the 21st century, when it will then be permitted to present my writing openly, I would like to show how this heraldry, which is often wrongly called prophethood by Earth humans, has already existed on Earth for long millennia, and has been passed on to earthly persons in terms of teaching by sent Playaran teachers. Thus, at various times, certain Earth humans were sought out and taught the Nokodimian teaching. Consequently, they were sought out as heralds and taught the teaching, as a result of which the real heraldry came into being. For this, I quote an extract from the educational writing for the teaching of the truth, teaching of the creation energy, teaching of life, as it will be called by Billy in future times. But until then, still spiritual teaching. Because for a long time to come, Earth humans will understand, by the false term spirit, what creation energies actually is. And this true understanding that it is about the effective creation energy will, as Billy says, still need a very, very long time before it generally finds its way into the consciousness of human beings. For the time being, Billy should not openly teach or disseminate what the beginning of the whole thing was. Consequently, he will only report and teach very vaguely about the origin of the teaching, and therefore also about Nokodimion. And if he does, then only in an old form that can be misleading. However, for my part, I have been permitted, and Semyaze received permission from a Playaran committee, thereby authorizing me to reveal and preserve the truth in writing, until Billy is to reveal my full written work for the learners of the teaching of the truth, teaching of the creation energy, teaching of life, years after my death, because only by then will what is to be learned have progressed far enough. Consequently, I will place my knowledge in trustworthy hands until then, so that it can be passed on to Billy after my death, and he will also be freed from the silence imposed on him. With regard to Billy's teaching, it is necessary to explain that I can only release in writing what I have learned in depth from him and have acquired and grasped as immense knowledge and understanding in such a way, with regard to his teaching in relation to very many things, and also in relation to the Herald Nocademian. Because although I am used to speaking, I feel hindered in this respect because the immense knowledge and all the connections are so problematic for me that I cannot easily put them into words and release them verbally. For the time being, through the creation energy teaching, as also that which is connected with the level Arahat Athersata, which is pure creation energy, has ever taught a first and only human being, even before his birth. With regard to the true creation energy teaching and its effectively true connections, and has elevated him to the status of universal herald, and accordingly provided him with first knowledge and first wisdom with regard to the extensive creation energy teaching, which he then had to spread further and ever further, learning independently and becoming an adult. He, Nocudemion, became a human being who, not taken literally, came from the level of Arahat Atersata, so to speak, and became a true human being, which is to be understood truthfully in such a way that he was a truly born and living human being with a material or physical body, and, as it were, like any other human being. He had only become knowledgeable and wise as a human being due to the knowledge transmitted to him from the level Arahat Athersata, which is why it was wrongly interpreted at that time that he was created directly from the level Arahat Athersata, created and thus emerged as a human being, which, on the contrary, was not the case, but he was born as a human being, but was taught and became knowledgeable and wise through the level Arahat Athersata. It is therefore to be understood in such a way that Nocademian was already impulsively influenced by teachings from the level Arahat Athersata before his birth, and he was born as a human being like any other human being, and as such lived according to the general norm of human being with all the implications of the negative and positive, but without observing and knowing the fulfillment of what is right in creation, and thus as a true human being. It was only when the knowledge and the energy and the power of the creational unfolded and began to work in him through his knowledge and self-effort that Nocademion became what he then was, namely the universal herald, whose work is ultimately to spread through the entire sevenfold creation, whereby our Dian or universal earth is the very first start and attempt outside the Ankar universe to teach the teachings of Nocademion. And this has to be done without proselytizing and among human beings who can call themselves self-thinking and self-deciding and who are by no means simply believers, meaning that they have disposed themselves to think, reflect, and find the truth themselves, and do not turn to something thoughtlessly, as believing human beings do, who believe in something that can never be proven, and also follow something completely imaginary or non-existent in terms of faith, and emulate something fictitious. Nocademion, by entering the level Arahat Atersata, was the first and only human being and universal herald to acquire natural wisdom, so that even as a child he understood and obeyed many facts of existence and the natural and creational naturally given laws. It followed from this that Nocademion was his own teacher, constantly teaching himself in all things, as is proper to every true discerner, which he perceived, recognized, understood, and also obeyed in relation to his current life in all things of nature, as well as in all existence and in all creational natural laws. So he was his own teacher, who was directly taught in wisdom, but also in everything worth knowing through the level Arahat Athasata, and understood whatever he was taught, whatever he perceived, experienced, and was able to experience and turn into knowledge and wisdom. Through the permission of Billy and Semyaze and a player in committee, I was allowed to learn some things that I would otherwise never have been able to learn, but which I am only allowed to release in 2020, because only then will the time have come when the following knowledge will be released, and only then should and may be taught. However, if I should end my time on earth before then, my letter is not lost, for it will be given to Srupata as a duplicate for safekeeping, just as I will also give a duplicate to a good and reliable friend, who, should it come to pass that I leave this world, will send it all to Billy. By order and with the permission of Billy and Semyaze, I now have the following to make clear. As I have been forcefully taught, the Universal Herald Nokodemian lived in the Ankar universe as a man highly educated in numerous things, as well as an absolutely new personality who no longer had any relation to his previous person. The creation energy that animated him was also not the same as that of the previous personality, just as these will have no relation whatsoever to their previous personalities. This is not because there can never and never be a rebirth of the same personality, and therefore cannot become one. The creation life energy, which animates a personality together with the pure creation energy, develops further and higher over a long period after death as a result of the positive knowledge learnt and accumulated during life, in order to then again, together with the animating creation energy, give life to a completely new physical personality as evolutionary energy. Thus, after a long duration, the working up of creation life energy and the revitalizing creation energy results in another evolved new form that activates consciousness and unconsciousness in an absolutely new physical personality and gives it the life impulse, but which is all-encompassing in terms of creation and cannot be reborn, and therefore also does not go to a very specific human being. Since the very beginning of all creational existence, there has never been a reincarnation or rebirth, and there never will be. According to the teachings of Nokodemian, which I was able to learn from Billy, it is to be understood correctly and unmistakably that the term rebirth in ancient times referred to the fact that after the passing away or death of a person who has given a teaching, the teaching he has given will be reborn or taught in its entirety by an absolutely new personality. Consequently, it is to be understood clearly that after the death of the person who has given the teaching, an absolutely new personality will take up the teaching again, and thus reincarnate or rebirth it, just as it was taught in the old time and taught on again, and thus reproduced or, to be precise, reborn. However, this term was reinterpreted over the course of time through various falsifications of teaching as well as linguistic changes and mistranslations, etc., as a result of misunderstanding, etc., and referred to the fact that being born again refers to human beings who are reborn in persona when they die. From then on, rebirth no longer referred to the fact that the teaching of Nokodemion was reborn, or taught again, or taught on, but the term was distorted in such a way that it was used to refer to a personal rebirth in persona, especially in the context of the air birth of a deceased human being. This led to the false teaching that human beings are reborn as the same personality after their death or demise, and continue their previous life, so to speak. The vitalizing creation energy and the evolutionary creation life energy are absolutely inseparable from each other. Although in the sevenfold creation, they are born in physical personalities and human bodies on many different life-bearing planets of the 7 different material belts or cosmoses of the 7 universes. Creation energy and creation life energy are destined for from the ground up. That is to say, as human beings, animals, creatures, or other material life forms, which for us human beings are innumerably diverse in their genus and species. Thus, one form of creation energy and creation life energy always remains the same and cannot change into another, as is possible in the opposite way with regard to the type of physical body through manipulation, crossing or breeding, etc. What I have to explain further is that after many millions of years of learning, later no longer in physical bodies, but only in an absolutely purely immaterial wise, the two forms of energy, which on the one hand is the absolutely life-impacting creation energy, and on the other hand, the absolute evolutionary pure creation life energy, now merge into the state of effective actual fusion with the pure energy level, Arahat, Autharsata, through their high development. Nokademion trained certain peoples educationally, who were chosen by him to help humanity in the universe to evolve faster according to creational natural laws and recommendations. This is to be understood in such a way that Nokademion never fathered offspring and did not create any peoples in this way, but that the peoples who followed him were human beings who followed his teaching and lived accordingly. Many other peoples, however, who rejected his teaching and lived according to rules, etc., that were contrary to all truth and aligned with their own senses and desires, degenerated over time and acted as usurpers. It was therefore decided that the Nokademian teachings should only be taught on worlds whose human beings were willing to follow them. The realization of this decision again took an infinitely long time, but one day the time had come for the teaching to be taught again by a wise herald among human beings, who thereby pacified their descendants and their successors as well as their peoples, enabling them to fulfill their task as helpers of humanity in a truthful sense. Unfortunately, however, there was always a group here and there among all the ancient peoples that still or again crossed the line. These old groups unfortunately also came to Earth and interfered in the Earth's development, causing some damage. After these ancient groups, called El Ranos, realized their mistake and rectified it, they undertook to help Earth humans in their further evolution. In order to fulfill this task, the universal herald of Nokademian's teaching, Henoch, was also asked to assist in this difficult matter. This is how heraldism came into being on Earth, although it was thoroughly falsified by Earth humans from the very beginning, and a prophethood was lied about and spread, and that the personality line of the prophet goes back to Atana, who is said to have created everything. From this, thousands of years later, as a successor to Henoch, new heralds emerged, who were then erroneously called prophets in uncertain names. Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Emmanuel Bernadette's note. The correct order of the heralds was according to Pleiadian information from the 14th of July 2007 Toledo, and the 2nd of March 2025 Quetzal, Enoch, Jeremiah, Isaiah, Elijah, and Emmanuel, according to which communities of faith came into being, which, in the course of time, received the designation religions. The teaching of the Nokademian, however, which was brought and taught by these heralds, was falsified by the Earth humans to such an extent that a vile, malicious false teaching arose from it. A misguided faith which has cost millions of human lives since its inception. Now Billy, as a herald, brings and fulfills the teaching of Nokademian, which corresponds to an extremely difficult task of heraldry. But he has access to the knowledge of Nokademia, because he alone has access to the Nokademian memory banks in the Ankar universe, from which he can retrieve all the values of the Nokademian teaching. and all its knowledge that have already been acquired. Bernadette's note: at present, only Billy has access to these memory banks, which are located in the Ankar universe. The ultimate aim of spreading the teaching is that it should be taught and disseminated in all 7 universes of creation. Thus, the teaching and knowledge of creation energy are inter-universal. For this reason, Billy's great knowledge is also to be explained when it comes to matters of creational natural laws, and thus also to the facts of creation energy. As a herald of modern times on Earth, he tirelessly writes one book after another, and one enlightenment pamphlet after another. In addition to the fact that he also has a great deal of writing to do for the Pleiaren and their federation, and is also responsible for a large library on Era, as Semyaze confided to me. But Billy does not want to talk about this, and is reticent about his knowledge in this regard. According to Semyaze, none of the Pleiaren have the same abilities and possibilities that Billy has in connection with the Nocademian teachings, which he was taught by his teacher Sfoth, and also learnt to a large extent himself. Sfoth was the only one who had taken on the task of thoroughly learning the entire knowledge of the Nocademian teachings through the various previous heralds, which had been taught for more than 52,000 years after a special event on Era, which brought about final peace on Era, and which was then also transferred to the entire Federation. In order to fulfill the commitment once made by Nocademion, that the teaching should be taught throughout the sevenfold creation, Sfoth decided to take it to a parallel universe. He took this very seriously and used the knowledge that a natural passage from the Ankar universe to our Dern universe had been discovered as a result of an earlier event 25 million years ago. Following the human beings from the Ankar universe who were already traveling to our universe at that time, he came to Earth towards the end of the first millennium, after Emmanuel alias Jesus, and, from 1936 onwards, was protective of the pregnancy of the mother of Eduard Albert Mayer, born on the 3rd of February 1937, whom he taught as a boy, who was then named Billy by the American Judy Reed in Persia in the 1960s, and also became known as Beam. Sfoth was the actual initiator or forerunner of Billy's discipleship on Earth, and to him, Billy, is also assigned the task of writing out everything of Nocademian's teaching for the Pleiaren, which is then photographed and brought to Era and taught there and throughout the Federation. The material he prepares for the Pleiaren is very labor-intensive and much more extensive than the material he prepares for his task here on Earth, as I have seen for myself. The scriptural material that Billy records for Earth humans regarding the teaching of Nocademian, which he teaches, is intended to help Earth humans to orientate their lives according to creational natural laws, in order to become true human beings and to evolve more quickly and easily, and to create profound knowledge as well as real and true peace in individual human beings, and thus also in Earth humanity as a whole. However, this must always be done voluntarily, that is to say, in such a way that human beings are not animated and proselytized or forced, as they are by religions and sects, organizations and the military, etc., but are only allowed to be taught about the real and true connections of existence, life, and the teaching of Nocademian, etc., according to their own interests. For example, when they ask personal questions. The human beings should then think for themselves about what has been explained, said, and read in order to work out for themselves the correctness of what has been explained. Because only self-generated thinking and knowledge is of real value for evolution, but not, as Billy says, a pseudo-thinking. In this wise, the individual human being also really takes responsibility for his own life, and effectively becomes an independent and valuable member of the world community. In everything, no belief may and should appear, but everything is to be understood solely in accordance with reality and its truth, as a result of which every human being is required to fathom everything for himself with regard to the truth, through his own inquiry and through his own thoughts and reflections, etc., in order to recognize the effective reality and the only truth that emerges from it. The human being is thus responsible within himself to do everything to prove this himself without harboring an unreal belief in an imaginary God or other similar higher powers. In order for the creation energy teaching of Nocodemian to become known on Earth, interested human beings worldwide form Figu study groups and Figu Landesgruppen of human beings who, out of their own clear mind, interest, and reason, pass on their personal thoughts to the next truly interested person. However, this should only be done in a factual manner and without proselytizing, and also without offending the person's views, opinions, religion, or other ideas. As a matter of principle, we may and should only respond to the interest and questions of human beings in an explanatory manner. Consequently, it is forbidden to advertise the mission or recruit members for the association, as is done elsewhere in constant succession by religions, sects and organizations, etc. Thus, only human beings who join out of their own honest interest and inquire about the teaching of the mission can join the Figu Association and thus Billy's mission. And since the Figu core group already exists in Hinterschmiedruti and is also active worldwide, together with many passive members of the association, Billy no longer works alone as a herald of modern times, but many truth-knowing helpers have come together around the world, who share everything worth knowing in a non-missionary wise way. In the spirit of the silent revolution of truth. Bernadette's note. This title was created by an 11-year-old Pleiadian named Cladina Icarina, as the worldwide mission of the Billy Heraldry is called, according to a name created by the Pleiadian Quetzal.